Cecilia Stain arrived on the apartment floor, her body convulsing under the grip of a demonic onslaught. Blood gushed from her mouth as her devotees struggled to restrain her. As the self-proclaimed high witch and leader of their cult, such occurrences were not uncommon. Confined to her house by boundary lines and the looming threat of supernatural retribution, Cecilia orchestrated the sinister wave of satanic murders from within the walls of her Krugersdorp apartment. What follows is a detailed chronicle of the Krugersdorp killings, South Africa, a harrowing saga entwined with cultism, Satanism, and a series of brutal murders perpetrated by a small yet formidable group of followers. Welcome to Sofa, Mocha and Mystery, where we dive into the world's most intriguing crimes and cults. In today's episode, we're unraveling the complex and otherworldly saga of a notorious cult, bringing you up to date with the latest developments as of 2024. Stay with us until the end for startling twists that have emerged post-sentencing, revealing new layers to this harrowing tale. Get ready for an episode filled with unexpected revelations and deep insights into this chilling story. On July 26, 2012, a young girl holding a gift-wrapped parcel knocked on the door of Joyce Boone's yard. Opening the door with curiosity, the young girl told the elderly woman that she was a friend of Natasha's, the next-door neighbor. It was indeed Natasha's birthday that day, so Joyce invited the young girl, Marcel, in. They chatted for a few minutes, when Zach and Michaela, a young couple, also arrived at her door. Marcel said they were friends of Natasha Bonnard's, so Joyce unsuspectedly let them in. Little did she know, but she was soon to become the first of a string of murders committed by this small group, part of a lectus perdeus. The next moment, Zach held a knife to Joyce's neck and told her to write a note to Natasha, inviting her over to her house after work. Fearing for her life, Joyce complied. At the same time, her small dog was locked in a cupboard. Soon, carnage unfolded. Marcel retreated to the car, at just 14 years old. Michaela, Zach's wife, too fled the scene as Zach began mercilessly stabbing Joyce repeatedly with a knife and hitting her over the head with a hammer. As the old woman crawled, bleeding, towards the phone to call for help, Zach Valentine pulled out a pocket knife and slit her throat. There was no way she could warn Natasha of her impending fate. Not much later, when Natasha arrived back from work, she knocked on her neighbor, Joyce's door, holding the note in her hand. She was excited to see her elderly friend on her birthday. However, she was not greeted by the smiling face of Joyce, but rather by the blood-smeared form of Zach Valentine. Her death was swift. Pulling her into the house, Zach began stabbing her viciously. As she took her last breath, the note was still clenched in her hand. Nestled in the heart of South Africa lies Krugersdorp, a town marred by its fair share of sinister tales. Yet, none compare to the horrors unleashed by this case, where murder masqueraded under the cloak of Christianity, fueled by beliefs in Satanism and the occult. To grasp the depths of this depravity, we must first delve into the cultural landscape of Krugersdorp itself. Within the tight-knit community of Krugersdorp, Christianity reigns supreme, and anything deemed anti-Christian is met with fervent fear. Even icons as innocuous as Spider-Man, Harry Potter, and Santa Claus are cast as agents of evil. This pervasive mindset, stemming from the satanic panic originating in the 1980s USA and spreading to South Africa in the 1990s, has indoctrinated generations, particularly within the devout white Afrikaans community. Moreover, a significant portion of Krugersdorp's populace grapples with poverty, breeding environments ripe for addiction, drug abuse, and desperation. It's perplexing, then, that lives were snuffed out for paltry sums, some as trifling as 700 rand, roughly $35. The question lingers: why were lives sacrificed for such modest gains? Yet, the mystery deepens as we ponder how individuals like Cecilia prey upon the vulnerable. Many victims already harbor underlying vulnerabilities, exploited by Cecilia to assert her dominance. For her, wealth is secondary. The true currency is power, wielded through occult manipulation and control. Cecilia Stain was at the tender age of 26 when she found herself navigating the complexities of marriage and impending motherhood. Married to a police officer, with a 4-year-old son and another child on the way, Cecilia's life took a curious turn when she crossed paths with Ria Grunarvold. Ria, a devout woman steeped in Christian faith, had established an NGO called Overcomers Through Christ in 2006. Driven by a fervent desire to assist those in need, Ria delved into the esoteric realms, undertaking courses in the occult. It was through this unconventional avenue of aid that Ria's path intersected with Cecilia's. From the outset, Cecilia's narrative was enigmatic and shrouded in mystique. Claiming affiliation with the Satanic Church, she boldly declared that her lineage was not of mortal origins. According to Cecilia, her father held the lofty status as a high-ranking Satanic priest, while her mother bore the mark of a witch from a lineage steeped in Satanic blood. Astoundingly, Cecilia purported to be a 42nd-generation witch, tracing her ancestry back to the ancient pharaohs of Egypt, including Ramses II. Her tales grew increasingly bizarre, encompassing feats of supernatural prowess. Claims of launching attacks without physical contact, shape-shifting into a vampiric form, and even professing to be the bride of Satan himself. Ria, discerning a dire threat lurking in the shadows, felt compelled to shield Cecilia from the malevolent forces she believed to be relentlessly pursuing her. Convinced of Cecilia's vulnerability following her departure from the Church of Satan, Ria embarked on a solemn mission to safeguard her charge at any cost. Thus, a vigilant team was assembled, comprising individuals like Marinda Stain, who stood steadfast in their resolve to shield Cecilia from the encroaching darkness. During these tumultuous times, Cecilia purportedly received ominous premonitions of imminent satanic assaults, further intensifying the sense of impending doom that loomed over their lives. When Cecilia first joined Overcomers of Christ, the group was immersed in the subject of Know Your Enemy, which fueled Cecilia's initial reverence within the group. Her claims of escaping a satanic bloodline added to her allure, but doubts began to emerge over time, especially as Ria, the group's leader, started questioning Cecilia's assertions. This skepticism deepened when the group's focus shifted from Know Your Enemy to Know Your Savior, a transition that left Cecilia feeling marginalized. To compound matters, Ria invited a pastor to assist with teachings, further diminishing Cecilia's influence. Driven by a thirst for control and a desire for adoration, Cecilia departed Overcomers of Christ and founded her own group, Electus per Deus, meaning chosen by God in Latin. Some members from Overcomers of Christ followed Cecilia into this new endeavor, forming a loyal core that fueled the group's growth in devotion and power. Initially, Electus per Deus presented itself as an extreme Christian group, but Cecilia's motivations stemmed more from resentment towards Ria than from religious fervor. The crimes and murders that followed were meticulously targeted at those close to Ria, intended to inflict maximum harm and heartache to her. Cecilia justified these actions to her followers as acts in the name of God, targeting individuals she falsely claimed were involved in Satanism. The question of how people could blindly follow Cecilia with unwavering devotion arises. Cecilia's manipulative tactics, combined with the fear ingrained within society, played a significant role. She staged purported seizures, simulated demonic possession by throwing herself into walls, and even went as far as biting open tiny balloons filled with her own blood to simulate hemorrhaging from her mouth during supposed demonic attacks. These theatrics lent credibility to her claims and further ensnared her followers. Additionally, drugs served as a draw for some members, with even individuals as young as 14 engaging in hard drug use. It's worth noting that Electus per Deus didn't solely attract societal miscreants, but also included members of relatively high status, such as a school teacher and a financial advisor. Initiates of Electus per Deus were welcomed into the group with a ritual of receiving a tattoo, marking their commitment. Their initiation also involved demonstrating their opposition to overcomers through Christ and Regrunarvolt by partaking in criminal activities, which progressively intensified to more severe offenses. Cecilia Stein, for the cult's financial benefit and her own gain, concocted a story about an overseas orphanage supposedly aiding children of Satanists, destined for sacrifice. This was a mere facade to raise funds for their nefarious activities. In reality, no such orphanage existed, and all the funds collected or stolen by the group were secretly pocketed by Cecilia. Members of Electus per Deus were unaware of Cecilia's deceit and believed the money was genuinely supporting the orphanage. When questioned about the use of money from their criminal acts, Leroux Stein, Marcel's brother and Miranda's son, revealed his share was meager, just enough to purchase cigarettes, a few hoodies, and food. In contrast, Cecilia discreetly indulged in luxury items such as new speakers, PlayStations, and more. She explained away these new possessions as gifts from friends or family, keeping her acquisitions hidden from her friends and cult members. Notably, she stored quad bikes at her parents' house to keep them out of sight and maintain the facade. The lack of scrutiny from her husband, a police officer, despite their shared living space in a small apartment with their 2 children and later, other cult members, is particularly striking. The first crimes committed by Electus per Deus were the setting and detonating of homemade bombs at the cars of certain members of Overcomers through Christ, as well as at Bible study meetings they held. Initially, these acts did not result in injuries. However, between 2012 and 2016, the cult's inner sanctum witnessed a horrifying escalation of violence. 6 cult members, masquerading as normal citizens, embarked on a series of heinous acts that left a trail of death and despair. Their victims included friends, strangers, and even their own spouses, sacrificed in the name of their twisted ideology. From the outside, these cult members maintained a facade of respectability, with their normal jobs and outward demeanor hiding the malevolence within. Cecilia Stein, a former teacher married to a police officer, leveraged her influence with chilling efficiency. Described by her father as a troubled liar and troublemaker from a young age, Cecilia was always trying to outdo those around her. Her husband, a law enforcement officer, seemingly turned a blind eye to her activities, leading to a marriage of convenience where they lived separate lives, yet shared a small apartment with their 2 children. Miranda, seen as Cecilia's right-hand woman, orchestrated many of the cult's schemes. Her unwavering devotion led her to move into the same residence as Cecilia, sparking rumors of obsession and blind loyalty. Miranda's children, Leroux and Marcel, became entangled in the cult, their perspectives warped by its toxic influence. Marcel, despite her excellent academic record and acceptance into medical school, fell under the cult's sway. The children were subjected to severe emotional and physical abuse from their mother, who also tried to alienate them from their father and the rest of their family. Zach Valentine, an insurance broker, and his wife Michaela, training to be a pastor, were also drawn into the cult. Both were part of Rhea's group, Overcomers through Christ, and were deeply religious, blinded by Cecilia's claims. However, Zach, who committed many of the murders, including that of Joyce Boone Zayar and Natasha Berger, did so in such a gruesome manner. His true motives remain in question. John Bonnard, a lifelong drug addict and a printer by trade, was later introduced to the cult through Cecilia's drug dealings. His interest in the cult was not driven by the occult, but by a need for a place to stay and access to drugs and money. The group spent a significant amount of time in what they called protection and prayer sessions, especially during Satanic high nights, when Cecilia claimed demons were after her soul. This battle between good and evil was marked by heavy drug use among all members, including the children. As Elector Spurduce's influence darkened, the cult's escalation into violence peaked about 2 years after its formation. In the summer of 2012, the initial victims, Natasha and Joyce, were tragically ensnared in this nightmare. Their lives brutally ended in a storm of violence and deceit. Natasha, a well-regarded lawyer and active churchgoer, alongside Joyce, a dedicated member of the church, became targets of Cecilia Stain's malevolent plans. Cecilia rationalized their deaths to the members of Elector Spurdeus as punishment for a prayer they recited, which she stated caused the deaths of several orphans. In reality, the reason for their deaths was due to her hatred of Gruesome. In the twisted worldview of Elector Spurdeus, this perceived misdeed warranted severe consequences. Cecilia coldly assigned Zach, Michaela, and Marcel the task of executing this grim mission. Zach mutilated both women, horrifically stabbing them tens of times, slitting their throats and bludgeoning them with a hammer. Joyce Boone-Zayar was a mere bystander in this plot, bait to lure Natasha. Natasha Berger was deeply devoted to her faith and to helping others, having discovered a profound connection with Jesus after attending a religious camp in 2005. Her father described her as someone who dedicated her life to the Lord and was committed to spreading happiness and God's love, joining overcomers through Christ in 2010. In the days leading up to her untimely death, Natasha was said to be battling spiritual attacks and felt haunted due to her work. Her father recounted incidents of her fighting demonic possessions and finding ominous signs, like a blood trail on her gutter. Despite these challenges, he believed that such attacks only strengthened her faith and drew her closer to God. Despite her horrific wounds, he is convinced that she was praying and embraced in God's love at the time of her death, unafraid and protected by angels. Following the gruesome events, an eerie exhilaration overtook the cult's core members. Zach and Michaela, overwhelmed by a sense of empowerment and excitement, eagerly phoned Miranda and told her of their atrocious action. In their minds, the bloodshed was a macabre victory, a demonstration of their allegiance to their cause. However, as the aftermath of their actions spread, casting a shadow over innocent lives, the full extent of Elector Spurduce's terror was just beginning to emerge. In the dark labyrinth of betrayal and malevolence, the terror inflicted by Elector Spurdeus escalated. Just a month after the tragic deaths of Natasha and Joyce, Cecilia's vendetta against Gruesome claimed another life. Reginald, Reggie, Ben Dixon, a respected pastor, author, and influential figure in the church. Reginald, known for his roles as a father, husband, and grandfather, was deeply admired as a guide and confidant within the Overcomers through Christ community. His sudden death sent a wave of grief and shock through those who cherished him. In a grim pursuit of retribution, Miranda, Zach, and Marcel, disguised as police officers, approached Reginald's home. Marcel, seated in the back of their vehicle, lent a semblance of normalcy to the situation, potentially easing any suspicions Reginald might have had. Cecilia, the mastermind, provided them with police uniforms to execute their dark plan, where Reginald was brutally murdered with an axe in his own yard. As they invaded Reginald's home, Marcel lingered in the background, a silent spectator to the looming atrocity. The scene that unfolded was one of ruthless violence, with Miranda wielding the axe mercilessly against Reginald. Marcel, still in her early teens, was engulfed in the horror of the frenetic attack, the screams and the dreadful sound of blood splattering. This heinous act, believed to be ordered by Cecilia, was a perverse form of retribution against Rhea, who once esteemed Reginald as a mentor. However, Miranda's confession revealed an even more sinister reality. She admitted to coercing Zach into participating in the murder, believing she was defending Rhea from someone she perceived as abusive. As the community grieved the loss of a respected figure, an appalling symbol of the lurking horror arrived at Rhea's door. A package containing a ghastly relic, a piece of brain matter, and a sinister note marked a new low for Elector Sperdeus. The note, a macabre token, chillingly read, "Now you can have your own little piece of Reggie." This was a stark, gruesome indication of the depth of evil the cult was capable of. In the early hours of an October morning in 2012, a new chapter of terror unfolded within Elector Sperdeus, culminating in the gruesome murder of one of their own. Michaela Valentine, only 25 years old and the wife of cult member Zach. This chilling act of violence, occurring within her own home, underscored the cult's descent into unfathomable darkness. As Michaela began to distance herself from the cult's increasingly violent path, she unknowingly sealed her fate. Her husband, Zach, deceptively aligned with Cecilia's sinister plans while pretending to support his wife. His duplicity reached a peak when he drugged Michaela's morning coffee with sedatives, ensuring her vulnerability to the impending attack, while he meticulously planned an alibi by arranging a meeting with an estate agent at their home later that day. As Zach left for work, Miranda and Marcel, her 14-year-old daughter, arrived at the scene. In a horrifying twist of maternal betrayal, Miranda not only orchestrated the attack but also coerced Marcel into the violence. This act of forcing her young daughter to stab Michaela, a woman she knew and looked up to, was a calculated move to implicate her in the crime, binding her to the cult's evil activities. "Now you are also a murderer," Miranda coldly stated to her daughter, marking a point of no return for Marcel. The brutality of the assault was beyond imagination. The walls and ceiling of the room were splattered with blood and human matter, evidence of the savagery that Michaela endured. The scene was a grim testament to the cult's capacity for cruelty, with nearly 70 stab wounds inflicted upon Michaela. Later, in a startling display of calmness, Zach returned home for his appointment with the estate agent, only to find Michaela's lifeless body. Despite the appearance of an unbreakable alibi and encountering such a gruesome scene, Zach showed an unnerving lack of emotion. This murder, layered with deceit and chilling brutality, remained an unsolved enigma that continued to plague the community until the eventual unraveling of the cult in 2016. Nearly 3 years later, in November 2015, the malevolent workings of Elector Sperdeus resurged, drawing in a new figure into their sinister realm: John Bonnard. His entry into the cult marked the beginning of a new, disturbing chapter. John Bonnard, who had struggled with a lifelong addiction to drugs, was roped into the cult through Cecilia's drug dealings, despite her marriage to a police officer. His main interests were finding shelter, drugs, and money, rather than the cult's occult activities. His introduction of Cecilia to Peter and Joan Mayers, his former employers with ambitions to open a substantial water park, became crucial to the cult's plans. The cult saw a chance to seize the Mayers' assets, leading to a gruesome incident in November 2015. Miranda and Zach, along with Marcel, orchestrated an attack on the Mayers. The complexity of Marcel participating in such a violent act while preparing for her final exams is perplexing. Meanwhile, Leroux was inadvertently sidelined from this murder due to accidentally shooting himself in the leg with an unsuspectedly loaded gun resting on his lap. Disguised as government officials interested in the water park project, Miranda and Zach were able to enter the mayor's residence under false pretenses. What began as an ostensibly formal visit rapidly deteriorated into a horrific scene of violence. Zach, in a display of ruthless calculation, fatally attacked Peter and Joan Mayers, with Joan suffering such extreme violence that her hand was left dangling by tendons. Following the murders, the cult members frantically searched the house for valuables, driven by desperation. The police, confounded by the absence of forced entry, speculated that the incident stemmed from a botched business disagreement. However, the real motive, veiled in secrecy and deceit, remained hidden, illustrating the terrifying depths of depravity Electus Berdeus had descended to in their moral corruption and violence. In 2015, after leaving the mayor's home with only 700 rand, about $35, a sum far below their expectations, Electus Berdeus, under Cecilia Staines' leadership, turned to insurance fraud for financial gain. They planned to fake the death of Zach Valentine, one of their members, and claim a 3.5 million rand, about $180,000, life insurance policy, with Cecilia as the beneficiary. This scheme was rationalized by a contrived story about funding an orphanage for children of Satanist victims, a narrative believed to be partially believed by Zach. The focus of their scheme was Jared Jackson, a 44-year-old street vendor who remarkably resembled Zach. Both Jared and his fiancée, former drug addicts who had turned their lives around, were residing in a storage unit within the same complex as Cecilia. With Jared's fiancée being 9 months pregnant, the couple was eagerly looking forward to the arrival of their child. Deceptively, the group enticed Jared under the guise of needing help with moving something, leading him to join them on what he believed to be a simple road trip. The group's intention was to stage Zach's death in a car accident during a supposed fishing trip. For the execution of this plot, Marinda and John Bonnard traveled in one car, while Leroux, Jared, and Zach traveled in another, specifically Zach's luxury SLK. Jared was unsuspectingly drugged with sedatives in his orange juice. The task of killing Jared fell to Leroux, around 18 years old and inexperienced in such acts. After a struggle, Leroux managed to strangle Jared. They then staged the accident scene by placing Jared's body in the driver's seat of Zach's SLK, which was further made to appear as Zach by adding his wedding ring and injecting insulin into the body, as Zach was diabetic. The car was then set on fire. The autopsy of Jared's body revealed a harrowing detail. Although his limbs were burned beyond recognition, his torso was intact enough to show that he was still alive when the car was set on fire. He had been burned alive. The police investigation into the burned car raised several suspicions, such as the lack of skid marks and the unusual positioning of the vehicle. Additionally, the fact that Cecilia, who had no apparent connection to Zach, was the beneficiary of his life insurance raised further doubts, leading to the denial of the insurance claim. Meanwhile, Zach's family, who were already grieving the loss of Michaela, were misled into believing that Zach had died in the car accident until his later appearance in court. Cecilia had promised Zach a new life with a changed identity after the insurance payout, coinciding with his need to disappear, particularly after being summoned for a lie detector test. With no funds materializing, the once affluent insurance policy worker lived on the streets, changing his name, and lived a life in stark contrast to the one he had known. Jared's wife, left without her husband's return and any credible explanation, reached out to Cecilia. In a manipulative response, Cecilia suggested that Jared might have left her because he didn't want to marry or have their child, and misled her about Zach's supposed accident. Jared's wife, faced with these circumstances, remained strong, staying clean and finding employment, unaware of the tragic reality of her husband's fate. In 2016, the Electus Berdeus cult embarked on a series of cold-blooded crimes known as the appointment murders. These murders, mostly executed within Cecilia's home, marked a horrific evolution in their modus operandi, targeting unsuspecting professionals who made house calls as part of their work. Glenn McGregor was their first victim in January 2016. After Marinda lured him under the guise of requiring tax services, McGregor was forced to transfer 6,000 rand, about $300, before being brutally killed with a gunshot to the stomach and strangulation, followed by submersion in scalding water. His body, like those of subsequent victims, was placed in the trunk of his car, which was then left in a secluded location with the keys in the ignition, in hopes that the car and body would be stolen. John Barnard, although never directly involved in the murders, played a crucial role in disposing of the bodies. He and Leroux would transport the bodies to the victims' cars using wheelie bins or crates. Barnard also created a diversion by playing loud music in an adjacent room while the murders were carried out. Another tragic case in the Electus per Deus saga was that of Kevin McAlpine, a 29-year-old financial advisor. In May 2016, his life was cruelly cut short by strangulation, a victim of the cult's brutal campaign. In a rare and chilling moment of direct involvement, Cecilia herself approached McAlpine's lifeless body, which was on the first floor of her residence, despite her living on the ground floor. Demonstrating her cold detachment, she kicked the body with her boot, marking her closest physical interaction with the series of murders orchestrated by the cult. His wife, Keisha, heavily pregnant at the time, mentioned that these were supposed to be Kevin's last appointments as a financial advisor. However, tragically, this encounter with the cult was to be his last meeting, ever. The mere 1,300 rand, $65, withdrawn from his account after his death served as a grim reminder that the motive behind these murders extended far beyond financial gain. His body was left in the trunk of his car, a testament to the callousness of the cult and a devastating blow to his awaiting family. The final known victim was Hanley Late Gang, a 52-year-old estate agent. Marinda, using a false identity, lured her under the pretense of discussing a property. After obtaining her bank details, Hanley was strangled and her body was later found by school children near a stream. Throughout these heinous acts, Marinda, Leroux, and Barnard employed intimidation tactics to coerce their victims into surrendering their bank cards, with Morcell verifying the pins at nearby ATMs. Despite the convictions for 11 murders, suspicions linger of more than 20 victims, but due to the cost of trials, further investigations were limited. The investigation into the Electus per Deus cult's heinous crimes took a significant turn following the discovery of Hanley's body. Police delved into CCTV and ATM footage, leading to Captain Buisson's crucial identification of Marcel and Leroux, even though they had attempted to disguise themselves with hoodies. The first arrest in the case was Maritzka Coates' cousin, who was able to identify both Marcel and Leroux. Maritzka, a journalist covering the case, found herself deeply involved as she fell in love with Leroux Stain during her prison interviews with him. Despite being married, she entered into a relationship with Leroux, which lasted for about 2.5 years. This connection put her career and social standing at risk. She lost her job, her marriage fell apart and was shunned by many. She admired Leroux for acknowledging his crimes in court, a moment that even saw Hanley's brother thanking Leroux for his honesty and providing closure to the family. Maritzka's insights into Leroux's experiences revealed a young man groomed for violence from a young age, subject to emotional and physical abuse by his mother, Marinda. Marinda had once beaten Leroux so severely with a baseball bat that he wet himself. Her and Cecilia also told him that he was possessed by demons. Furthermore, Leroux told Maritzka that Cecilia and his mother, Miranda, would give him an ultimatum when faced with killing people. You, or your girlfriend. Zach's girlfriend was affectionately known as Cupcake. However, she was another ruse and manner of manipulation by Cecilia. She had multiple phones, and essentially catfished Leroux into believing he was dating someone who didn't exist. Cecilia was the puppet master, using Leroux's supposedly love interest as manipulation. It's her, or them. Maritzka faced a personal dilemma in breaking up with Leroux after meeting someone new, choosing to gradually distance herself, which only caused further distress for him. In a poignant statement, she said, "I thought to myself, how do I not break a serial killer's heart? He is already so broken." Leroux did not take her distancing herself well. One day she received a call from one of his friends from jail, saying that he had tried to kill himself. Maritzka knew she had to make a decision. Move on with the new person she had met, on the outside, or continue her relationship with Leroux. Despite him feeling like her soulmate, she felt manipulated. If he was successfully able to murder 3 people, why wasn't he able to kill himself? She walked away. Despite the pair not having spoken in years, she speaks with fondness and almost admiration of him. Captain Buisson's investigation uncovered more damning evidence. At the school where Marinda worked, he found ammunition stored in an unused oven of Marinda's home economics class. Additionally, a will provided by the school principal showed that Marinda had written her children out of her will, making Cecilia the sole beneficiary. This revelation was pivotal in persuading Leroux to cooperate with the authorities. Leroux accepted a plea deal and was sentenced to 35 years for each murder, with parole eligibility after half the sentence. John Bonnard, another cult member involved in disposing of bodies and acting as a watcher, received the same sentence but died in prison of natural causes in 2023. Marinda pled guilty, receiving multiple life sentences without seeking a deal, likely to avoid casting Cecilia in a negative light. Morcel, initially denying her involvement, eventually admitted to her role in the murders and received a life sentence with the possibility of parole in 25 years. Zach, manipulated by Cecilia into faking his own death, was eventually discovered living under a false identity by a church group, leading to the final unraveling of the cult. The recognition came from a church member who noticed his distinctive tattoos, leading to the authorities being alerted. Because of the life insurance policy of Zach's, Cecilia Stein was linked to the murders, along with the testimony of Leroux. All through her trial, she remained eerily silent. She received 13 life sentences and 155 years imprisonment. As the Electus Deus case unfolded with its various tragic and complex dimensions, another intriguing development occurred within the prison walls. Cecilia Stein, the manipulative leader of the cult, found herself in a relationship with another inmate, a remarkably beautiful woman named Shoritha Britz. Shoritha, convicted of orchestrating her husband's murder in 2021, was an unlikely companion for Cecilia, as there was no prior history of same-sex relationships for either of them, despite rumors of a romantic relationship between Cecilia and Marinda, as well as other female members of the group who came and went. The relationship between Cecilia and Shoritha became public when photos of them, taken inside the prison with a contraband cell phone, were leaked. These images, showing them in civilian clothes and posing for selfies, caused an uproar. Their possession of a cell phone in prison, a serious infraction, led to disciplinary action, and Shoritha was transferred to another facility as a result. This relationship seemed to be more than just romantic. It was strategic for Cecilia. Shoritha's family continued to visit her, providing Cecilia with a link to the outside world. There were rumors that Cecilia tried to orchestrate hits from inside the prison. The revelations about Cecilia's prison activities, including her relationship with Shoritha and alleged attempts at maintaining control and influence from behind bars, adds another layer to the already complex narrative of the Electus per Deus cult. This development shows Cecilia's continued manipulation and strategic thinking, even while incarcerated, further entrenching her reputation as a master manipulator. This series of events not only brought an end to the Electus per Deus cult's reign of terror, but also exposed the complex and deeply personal dynamics within the group, including relationships formed under extraordinary circumstances and the tragic consequences of manipulation and grooming. We hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a like, subscribe, and share your thoughts on this case in the comments below.